Thank you for coming. We just love to see you. Please consider staying after the service for coffee and conversation so that we can get to know each other better. I also want to welcome those of you who are watching us from home. Thank you also so much for being with us. Today, we welcome Reverend Stephen Landale, our speaker. Those who want to speak to Stephen after the service, he'll be available for a circle talk after that. And I believe we have some more announcements. Lillian?
Good morning. A couple quickies. There is a board meeting this afternoon at 12:30. Congregants, of course, are always invited to observe if you choose to do that. I just want you to know it looks like it's going to be an extremely long meeting because it has probably about, 35, 40 items on it, but I promise you it will not be. There are 2 items of discussion, not decision, but discussion, I'd like the congregants to think about this morning, and if you have any thoughts, please pass them on to a board member. One is about our after-sermon discussions. Each week we find we have less time, and so we're going to have a little discussion about extending the Sunday service so we actually can have that discussion while we're all still together by about 10 or 15 minutes. So think about that and let a board member know if that's something that you would really like. We are also going to be rediscussing masks. So pro or con, COVID is rising. Board members, just a little hand up, so if you want to say something, there we are. Please give us your views. Thank you.
Okay, in addition to that, I would like to mention just one thing. Every Wednesday at 4:30, there is a Women in Black Vigil. All they are saying is end violence. If you would like to join that, it's in front of Fred Meyer every Wednesday. Too many people in our community do suffer from hunger, illness, or homelessness. To help, we join with several Roseburg churches in support of the fish pantry. We have baskets along the walls on the, they're right here. I'm gonna change that one, in which you can place any item you wish to donate. There are envelopes available in the baskets for each cash donation. Thank you. And thank you all for helping us end hunger in this county. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to John Worm, our greeter today. Thank you. And as always, Jake Tranter, thanks a lot for all your help. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment in the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude. Taking the time to look into one another's faces and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope, is hallowed by our presence together. Our opening words this morning are responsive words. If you don't see them on the screen, they are number 439 in your hymnal there. We gather in reverence before the wonder of life. The wonder of being together, so close yet so apart. Each listening, each trying to speak. We gather in reverence before all intangible things that eyes see not, nor ears can detect. Please rise as you can and sing with me hymn number 346. Come sing a song with me. Now is the time in our service when we remember our joys and our concerns with silent or spoken candle lighting to mark significant milestones in our lives. I invite those who wish to light a candle, silent or spoken, to please come up one at a time, starting with my right side. And those of you at home, you may take this opportunity to light a candle for your own joys or concerns. For those with spoken candles, please give your name and please be as brief as you can. join us in singing Spirit of Life.
We are having technical difficulties, so you'll have to sing it on your own.
We'll do it. You know we can. You're all doing very well. The hazard of having an alto like me start it is that it might be starting a little low for us, so I don't know. The offering is a sacrament of the Free Church. We are supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join us. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values. Our anthem this morning is number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. I'm not doing this by myself. Everyone's doing it.
I can start this one.
Okay, great.
Get up there, Stephen, because I know you know this really
do.
well. You can lead
I
it.
might be coming in a key lower than it's written, but okay. Oh boy. Though I may speak with bravest fire and have the gift to all inspire and have not love, my words are vain as sounding brass.
Relax those muscles as you find them taut within your body. Let them release. Let the chair completely support you. And breathe in. And once again out. A person will worship something. Have no doubt about that. We may think our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our hearts, but it will out. That which dominates our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives and character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship. For what we are worshiping, we are becoming. And as you slowly bring yourself back to this present time, in this present space, think about who we are and what we'd like to become. And now, I would like to introduce you to Reverend Stephen Landale. He has been a hospice chaplain for over 9 years, served as a full-time UU parish minister for 11 years, and has been a guest UU preacher and consulting minister for most of the last decade. He will be available during coffee time after the service to join in the discussion, and we want to extend a warm welcome to Reverend Landale and his wife Heather. Welcome.
Thank you, Glennis, and everyone. It's always good to be here. And I'm a believer in worship that somehow everything happens as it should. Even if there's a tech issue, then we get to sing spontaneously, and that's its own blessing too. When I was ministering with Bell Street Chapel, a UU congregation in Providence, Rhode Island, I had the pleasure of witnessing both adolescents and adults share their personal credos following a process of reflection. For the adolescents, it was part of their coming of age process. One of these stands out in memory. I will let nothing stand between me and the person in front of me. The person who spoke these words, a young adult about age 25, named Tom, did so with unusual strength and clarity. He expressed fully and fearlessly a fierce determination to let no belief structure or prejudice or agenda of any kind get in the way of complete, open, respectful, or even reverent attention to the person in front of him. Very simple, and yet very hard to live. Simple in concept, hard to live. In the nearly 20 years since that time, the simmering culture wars in our country have come to a full boil. We are increasingly encased in our political camps with not only perspectives, but the very information upon which we base our perspectives increasingly separated and polarized. So much of this is beyond our control. But what is under our control is ourselves. We can change the quality of attention we offer to the person in front of us. We can thereby change the likelihood of other people with different views wanting to speak with us vulnerably. We can improve the odds on compassion, mutual learning, and cultural healing within our spheres of life, perhaps our families. My work as a hospice chaplain has led to a rededication to living Tom's credo. When someone has a terminal illness or who has a loved one with just months or weeks to live, they need someone who gives them their full attention, who lets nothing stand in the way of that care. So I've been fortunate to be put in the position of needing to live or strive towards Tom's credo. Now, another side of hospice work is less obvious. I am invited into the homes, the front porches, the living rooms, bedrooms, and bathrooms. Hospice workers who drink a lot of water in the car in between visits need to relieve ourselves somewhere. Of a remarkably broad range of people, broader than I typically encountered as a UU minister, church minister. I once had a man who saw me pull up to his small town home in my red Prius with a Biden bumper sticker. He greeted me at the door with a MAGA hat in his hand and welcomed me into his home by putting the hat on my head. I've had the honor and privilege and sometimes challenge of serving basically good people who had strong views that were the polar opposite of my own on same-sex marriage and many other topics. I've learned to set all that aside and focus on what I was there for, the person in front of me and the spiritual support I may provide. The work has been an excellent training in uncovering my own prejudices and in keeping my heart open to people who I would otherwise have simply judged or perhaps sought to change, including that guy with a MAGA hat. He and his wife became two of my favorite clients, actually, and on Valentine's Day, I continued our practical joke war by writing on a chalkboard that they had set up in their bathroom, Joe plus Jill, with a heart around it. My political views haven't changed much in the last 10 years, but hospice work has made me slower to judge and quicker to see when ideological, religious, or other barriers spring up between people with a snap of righteousness, including myself. I've also come to see more clearly the unintended collateral damage of the culture wars. All wars have collateral damage. I'd like to share now a true story that took place among people who had very similar perspectives as an illustration of this collateral damage. And before I share this story and others, I'd like to acknowledge some basic facts here. I am a privileged white man speaking about issues including abortion. I cannot fully know what a woman's experiences regarding this issue are, any woman. It is my goal to broaden perspectives and prove the odds on compassion. If I do not succeed with you because of unintended collateral damage on my part for my own words or insensitivity, I sincerely apologize, and I'd be glad to hear from you after the service. And if we're going to make any progress in these matters, then we need to be vulnerable and take risks, well-intended, mindful risks, which is what I'm attempting to do today. So, a long time ago, a female friend of mine shared with me a troubling experience. She just had a miscarriage, which was painful enough. And when a woman has a miscarriage, she and her partner, if she has one, and I do know this from personal experience, usually do not receive the same kind of recognition and support for their grief as with other losses. So my friend shared her concern in perhaps the safest place she knew, her church women's group. This was a women's group in a very progressive church in a very progressive city. My friend, when sharing of her loss to this very compassionate group, used the language that felt most real to her. She said she'd lost her baby. She had felt her baby inside of her, and she'd begun to talk to him or her. The word miscarriage was not sufficient to describe her experience. She was experiencing the loss of her baby and her and her partner's hopes and dreams and plans for that child they were envisioning. That was her experience. Her friends were supportive, of course, but their responses were different than she'd previously experienced and had come to expect. I can't recall the specific details she shared, but it was something like this. Their words were more measured, their eyes sometimes averted. There was an awkwardness and a hesitation in some to provide the full-hearted loving embrace that women had come to expect from one another in this group. So, what were the barriers that came between my friend and her friends in this trusted group, this group she'd been part of for years? She felt it had to do with her language and her felt experience of her loss as a loss of a baby. This language and imagery and reality for her ran against the grain of their pro-choice positions and arguments related to abortion. Pro-choice positions frame the abortion debate in terms of a woman's right to make choices about her own body, to make her own health care and reproductive choices without any interference from the state or a religious body or anybody else, including her parents if she's a teen. I doubt there is pro-choice literature anywhere that uses the word baby. It complicates things. If the debate is seen to be over babies, then the other side wins. But if a miscarriage is the loss of a baby, then this could have troubling implications for those who frame abortion solely in terms of choice and a woman being able to control her own body. My friend herself, by the way, was pro-choice. So I don't know if these thoughts went consciously through the minds of my friend's friends, but it's very easy to imagine the unease when their friend used the B word with regard to the end of her pregnancy. So now I'd like to add that it's very easy to imagine similar situations in other groups with opposing views. A woman in a women's group in a strongly conservative church where pro-life views are assumed might, and I emphasize might, probably happens some of the time, find that the response she receives to her miscarriage to be tinged with judgment or pity based on the assumption that a woman's primary role is to bear children, and her effort has been a failure of some sort, or at least could be seen that way by others. And now in Texas, at least, where individuals are empowered to file lawsuits based on a stranger's abortion, a woman who experiences a miscarriage might fear sharing this information even with friends. For if word gets out, she might be investigated, formally or informally. Was this truly a miscarriage, or was it an abortion? Are you a criminal? Or she might fear that hiding the experience could look suspicious as well. So perhaps she should be more open. In any case, fear and calculation have now complicated the expression of grief with miscarriages as well as with abortions. When political views are elevated to uncompromising ideology, when they are put on a pedestal, they have the easy potential to destroy any hope of living with this practice. I will let nothing stand between me and the person in front of me. You can live with fidelity to your ideology or with fidelity to your open-hearted, curious, and fully respectful experience of the person in front of you, but you can't live with both at the same time. One has to be primary. The more politically charged and polarized an issue becomes, the more collateral damage there will be in ways no advocate or policymaker could foresee or want to acknowledge. I've never heard anybody talking about this, for instance, as an example of how does this affect people who've had miscarriages. Political movements of any kind seem to require a distillation of complicated views into something that can easily fit onto a bumper sticker in large font or a sign you can carry at a rally, or a short, catchy slogan for chanting in groups. That's great for rallying the troops, strengthening resolve, grabbing headlines, and increasing visibility and hope for a movement. Good things. But that's terrible for acknowledging nuance and complexity, keeping an open mind and compassionate heart for any new perspective or situation or person. The more simplified one sees an issue, and I would argue that both the pro-choice and pro-life positions, just by their very names, are overly simplified. The more simplified one sees an issue, the more blind or even callous one can become to anything or anybody that doesn't fit. And there's less likely room for any compromise. So in the news this last week, a 10-year-old girl had an abortion following a rape. This real human experience flies in the face of some conservative stereotypes of abortion and would naturally tug at the heart of anybody who does not have an extreme view. Most Americans would readily agree that this girl, younger than my own daughter, should not be forced to give birth in such a situation. Many people have put their anti-abortion or pro-life views on a pedestal, though probably won't want to see any of this. Just as women in a liberal women's group were uncomfortable with hearing their friend describe her miscarriage as a baby. So in the news, the response was from conservative outlets, oh, this was all made up. I read just on the way down here, the Wall Street Journal editorial page first said this was a fanciful lie and noted that Biden had repeated it. They had to retract it later when it turned out to be true. Then when it turns out to be true, the focus shifts to the doctor that they said did this illegally, and it doesn't look like she did, and the rapist, who they said was and may have been an illegal immigrant. But just notice the tendency. The story, the 10-year-old girl is not what people want to look at in certain sides. First, it never happened. Then we look at the doctor. Then we look at the rapist. And there's some, of course we want to think about justice and things. But it's a little easier to see what happens on the other side of a political issue than what we may be doing. I assume most people here are progressive politically. Not everybody, though, perhaps. So back to this creed of my former congregant, Tom, to let nothing stand between us and another person. To live like this, we must be consciously aware of our attachments to beliefs about how the world is and how it should be. Our passions and our need for bumper sticker ideology will necessarily create blind spots, always, for aspects of human experience, and therefore actual human beings. It doesn't mean we don't support certain views, but just be aware there's blind spots being created. To be fully committed to this radical credo, let us be willing every single day and with every single encounter to be open to being influenced and changed by our compassionate experience of another human being, or perhaps any living being of any kind. Let us seek out news of experiences that do not come to our feed. Let us seek out people with different experiences and views. Let us put humility, curiosity, and wonder ahead of pride, certainty, anger, and determination again and again. These latter qualities may have their place, but let us put them in their place, call on determination when it is needed, and make our default stance one of openness, receptivity, and compassion. I focused thus far on the kind of attitude and open stance that living Tom's credo requires. I'd like to explore more now our habits of speech and of framing issues. If we want to improve the odds on human encounters of mutual respect and learning, of people truly seeing one another as they are without ideological or other filters, then I believe we would do well to tend to the following. First, remove jargon, except as a necessary shortcut with like-minded people. Jargon reduces complex ideas to simple phrases or words, and it excludes those who don't use the language readily, perhaps not understanding or just not agreeing with it. On Oregon Public Radio a few months ago on Think Out Loud, I heard host Dave Miller interviewing an advocate for including history on racial oppression in public schools. I am 100% supportive of this advocate's cause. Yet after hearing her speak for 5 minutes, I was rolling my eyes and begging her to stop. She couldn't hear me, so she continued. The advocate must have used the phrases anti-racism and anti-racist dozens of times. She repeatedly cited as her goal to build an anti-racist society. Now, if she had been speaking to a progressive audience that understood and agreed with these terms, that would be one thing. But she was speaking potentially to any Oregonian, including my new MAGA hat-wearing friend in a conservative small town, whose wife, I believe, I can easily imagine playing NPR on the radio. Anti-racism is liberal jargon. It is a shortcut, and it is particularly problematic jargon in a wider audience because, like it or not, just or not, many, if not most Oregonians in more conservative areas, like around here, would experience a Portlandian saying anti-racist as saying something like, "You hillbillies are racist." Or, "We'll give preferential treatment to non-white people, so you uneducated whites unfortunately may never get a promotion or get into college." I've heard some heartfelt stories of somebody working hard and not getting a promotion and somebody of color getting the promotion ahead of them. Whether it was all justified or not, there's some heartfelt, real experiences that were attributed to this, and it makes people angry. Whether or not these or similar reactions are fair or rational, I think some of them are. Anybody who has been paying attention to conservative anger at progressive coastal elites could predict such a response. If you've been reading it all, this is where the anger's coming from. If you don't want somebody like Donald Trump to get elected again, don't incite the anger. The interviewee displayed zero interest and/or ability, as I saw, to imagine a broad audience and discuss her goal in terms of shared interests using everyday language. I admire her conviction and courage and what she's standing for, the time she's giving to it. But I believe she's been worshiping at the altar of anti-racism and an anti-racist church, basically, to the point where her effectiveness is diminished. As I saw it, she seemed more interested in, as Brene Brown puts it, being right than getting it right. Being right rather than getting it right. If this speaker had been striving to let nothing stand in the way between herself and her audience, including Oregonians who have not yet been convinced to support such education in public schools, I mean, what's she on the radio for except to convince somebody, right? If they already are on board with anti-racism, they're already convinced. So anyway, if we're really committed to this connection, I believe she would have erased the triggering anti-racism language, and it is triggering for some people, from her vocabulary. I believe she would have put the focus on good, historically accurate history. Good, historically accurate history. And sought to demonstrate to her audience in everyday language how peculiar it is that major pieces of American history are left out or minimized. And if we start making lists of these pieces that are left out, pretty much every piece of strangely omitted American history are things like the Tulsa Massacre, not the race riot, it was a massacre of an African American community, post-Civil War practices, such as arresting African Americans for vagrancy, because they couldn't get a job, when they are sitting downtown, and then, for punishment, forcing them to work for their former slave owners, like the very people who owned them. So basically, shifting it from ownership slavery to rental slavery, which in some cases was worse. Because when a human being was someone's property, they tried to protect their investment. When it was a rental, a 5-year sentence, not so much. And plenty of other examples. I can't recite them all day. The internment of the Japanese, something I learned about not too long ago. Women were not legally allowed to open their own bank accounts until the 1960s. Some of you remember this? It was like the 1960s, women in America could not open their own bank accounts? Holy smokes. And from a progressive point of view, you might look at abortion restrictions from the lens, I think this is totally justified, of men controlling women. That's a valid lens. But it's helpful to see there are other lenses too. And people are not crazy for looking at some of them. So, I got to get away from all those. It'll be a very different sermon. So this speaker on NPR, or OPB, she could affirm that there always has been and still are great things about America, and those things should be included as well. But a full and accurate history of our country should include these other significant events and patterns in the name of historical accuracy. And you know what? Kids and teens can handle it. And it's totally possible to be proud of your country while learning of bad things that have happened here and wanting to make sure things like them don't happen again. This kind of discourse might actually convince some people. I find it useful to extend Tom's credo in this manner. Whenever we are speaking on a controversial issue, bring to mind a real or imagined person who is a good person, but currently on the other side of the issue being addressed, and on the other side of the culture wars generally. Don't say anything that would unnecessarily come between you and this other person, triggering language for them. Remember the platinum rule, not the golden rule. Do unto others you would have to do. The platinum rule is do unto others as they would have them do unto you. Think from their perspective. What's triggering for them? So use language they can relate to. Find and speak to shared goals, such as good education, which includes accurate history. And let's get off our high horses. It's most often helpful to speak to just the one issue at hand, I believe, rather than put your listener in the choice of choosing your whole package of progressive or conservative views or nothing, okay? I had a real eye-opening experience when reading the book Jesus and John Wayne by Kristen Kobes Dumas. By the way, this book has helped me go from saying, how could white evangelicals go from, did they hold their nose and elect Trump? Like, how did that happen? This book makes a case of, his aggressive qualities were actually what led them to support him. It's a very good book. But in this heavily researched book, the author noted that as late as 1970, it might have been a little later, Southern Baptists were split on abortion. There were public debates in journals. You were allowed to be a good Southern Baptist minister and support abortion rights. Okay? Just let that sink in a little bit. But as abortion rights came to be lumped in with a larger feminist agenda that included aspects experienced to be threatening and even insulting to women who chose the more traditional role of homemaker, Southern Baptists united in opposing abortion. And also Roe v. Wade gave them a sense of feeling beleaguered believed and opposing it. So Southern Baptists didn't suddenly discover scripture that they felt made abortion wrong. Some had been citing it all along, but others had a different view. But the agreement came when they came to see it as part of an all or nothing choice between their traditional way of life that they saw and see as promoting stability and godliness, not horrible things, and a liberal, chaotic free-for-all. A stark choice. So I wonder, if not to put it on liberals' lap, but still, looking at what we can control, if liberals had spoken of abortion rights in more measured and less celebratory ways, if a less reactionary response might have been avoided. Following this approach, we'll find ourselves speaking more slowly, taking the time to describe things in common language for a few sentences, perhaps, rather than using quick catchphrases that make your allies smile and your opponents angry and you to feel justified inside. We may speak more softly, with more humility and compassion, focusing on the issue at hand rather than a grand catch-all, all-or-nothing vision. We may learn to speak with a mixture of conviction and genuine openness to change, a quality that tends to earn respect and trust. We may find our blood pressure reducing, our relationships improving, and our causes helped because people are more likely to listen to us. Once in a while, we may rethink and even change our stances on a major issue, as did Malcolm X and other great leaders. What do you know? They changed their position over 10 or 20 years. This is a great time to practice a serenity prayer, praying and striving for the serenity to accept what we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Tom's Credo provides an excellent guide for discerning and changing what we can for the better. As always, that which is most under our control is ourselves. Our words, our actions, our listening and presence with one another. And if we work at it, even the belief structures that undergird all of these. So let us develop or strengthen a habit of stepping outside of ourselves and noticing when we are letting something stand in between ourselves and another, of noticing how we are listening, and of when we are speaking the language of the culture wars rather than the language of mutual understanding. Earlier we sang one of my favorite hymns, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. Some of you may recognize the lyrics as paraphrasing Christian scripture from 1 Corinthians 13, the famous chapter on love with passages often read aloud in weddings. It begins, If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And it includes these remarkable words, if you think, in Christian scripture. If I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. Wow. So how about this new verse for our age? If I have the power to win political victories, but I win them not with love, those victories will be short-lived and create a backlash. Actually, if there are any poets in house here, I'd gladly welcome your assistance to make it more like a verse. The second paragraph of 1 Corinthians 13 is the one most quoted at weddings, beginning, Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. We might derive from this. Love assumes that people with different views might still be good people and have reasons for those views that we might understand if we take the time to listen. Love means assuming the best in others. Love means using shared and inviting language, working towards shared goals, to heal rather than to be right. So let us strive to give our full attention to others, to let nothing stand between us and them. Let us listen with love, and let us speak with love. Amen. Thank you. And we'll be singing somehow. I don't know what's happening yet. Number 299, Make Channels for the Streams of Love.
Make channels for the streams of love, where they may broadly run, and love has overflowing streams to fill them everyone. But if at any time we seize such channels to provide, the very founts of love for us will soon be parched and dried. For we must share if we would keep this gift all else above. We cease to give, we cease to have, such is the law of love.
In closing, let's remember where hate rules, let us bring love. Where sorrow, joy. Let us strive more to comfort others than to be comforted, to understand others than to be understood, to love others more than to be loved. For it is in giving that we receive, and in pardoning that we are pardoned. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us, among us, now and always. If you would like to rise as you are able, we'll sing Go Lift It Up.
Moonlight, star,
Blessed be. Join us for coffee and conversation, if you will.